I was standing in my cousin's backyard in Mississauga, holding a can of Canadian that had gone warm an hour ago, when I heard a laugh that used to live in my chest like a second heartbeat. That laugh. I'd know it anywhere, bright, a little too loud, the kind that's designed to make sure everyone within 20 feet turns to see who's having the most fun. It hadn't changed at all. I turned around, and there was Garrett Holloway, except he wasn't the Garrett I remembered from the back row of grade 12 calculus, the one who used to forget his wallet at the Tim Hortons drive-thru and let me cover it every single time. This Garrett was wearing a blazer that fit like it had been tailored on purpose, a watch that caught the patio lights every time he gestured, and he was holding court in the middle of my cousin Madison's engagement party like he'd been personally invited. He had, small world, smaller city, everyone in this corner of the GTA seemed to know everyone eventually. Whitney Sorensen? He said my name like he was unwrapping a gift he already knew the contents of. I turned, and there he was, drink in hand, grinning that grin I used to think was charming and now recognized as something closer to a salesman closing in on a mark. "Garrett," I said, keeping my voice even. I had practiced even. 8 years of practice, give or take. He looked me up and down, not subtly, the way he used to assess a room before deciding who in it was worth his time. "Wow," he said. "Look at you. Still doing what was it? The spreadsheet thing?" He said spreadsheet thing like it was a hobby I hadn't quite grown out of. "Financial analysis," I said, "at a pension fund." Right. He nodded like this confirmed something he'd already decided about me a long time ago. Then he tilted his head, and the smile widened in a way I remembered from exactly one other moment in my life. The night he'd told me 3 weeks before our college graduation that he'd met someone else and that I shouldn't make this a whole thing. "So," he said, loud enough for the people drifting near the cheese table to catch it without trying. "Never did find anyone to put a ring on it, huh?" A couple standing near us, my cousin's coworker and her husband, both heard it. I watched the coworker's eyebrows climb half an inch. Garrett just stood there, comfortable in his own cruelty, waiting for me to shrink the way I used to shrink whenever he aimed something sharp in my direction and called it a joke. But here's the thing about 8 years. A lot happens in 8 years. A lot Garrett Holloway knew absolutely nothing about. Before I could open my mouth, I heard a sound that rearranged something in my chest. Small running feet on the Holloway's interlocking stone patio, and a voice, clear and certain, cutting straight through the adult chatter. "Mom! Dad's here! I told him you'd be by the lemonade table." My daughter, Poppy, came barreling across the yard in her favorite cardigan, the one with the strawberries on it, dodging between a folding chair and someone's golden retriever. She crashed into my side, grabbed my hand with both of hers, and started tugging me toward the gate at the side of the house, where I could already hear it creaking open. I looked at Garrett's face in that exact second. I watched something behind his eyes recalibrate. The smirk didn't disappear right away. It just sort of curdled, the way milk does, before you notice it's gone bad. Because standing at that gate, not announcing himself, not needing to, was my husband, and Garrett Holloway recognized him immediately. Most people in finance circles from Toronto to Calgary would have. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because the party was really just the ending of one story. And you need the beginning to understand why Garrett's face did what it did when those gates swung open. 8 years ago, I was 22, finishing my commerce degree at Western, and I loved Garrett Holloway with the kind of devotion that should probably come with a warning label. We'd been together since second year. He was the guy everyone in our residence assumed would end up running for student council president, just because rooms liked him. Easy charm, easy confidence. The kind of guy professors remembered by name. My roommate at the time, a girl named Priscilla, who I haven't talked to in years but still think about, used to say Garrett collected people the way some guys collect sneakers. Not because he needed them, but because having them felt good. I didn't listen to her. I was 22 and certain I understood the parts of him other people missed. We were supposed to move to Toronto together after graduation. He got an internship at an asset management firm downtown first, and within 2 months his social calendar had filled up with names I didn't recognize and work things that ran suspiciously late on a Thursday. By April, he was telling me I was being a lot, that he needed room to figure out who he was outside of us. I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment on Richmond Row, phone face down in my lap, asking myself what exactly I needed to fix to make this work. I spent the better part of a summer on that question. It turned out to be the wrong question entirely. The actual breakup happened over a phone call that lasted 4 minutes. He said we wanted different things, that he needed to focus on his career, that he hoped I'd understand. He called at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, 3 weeks before convocation. I found out through a mutual friend 2 days later that he'd been seeing someone from his office for over a month before that phone call. I cried for exactly as long as felt necessary, and then I did the thing that turned out to be one of the better decisions of my adult life. I threw myself into my CFA coursework and stopped apologizing for taking up space. In my final year, I had a professor, Dr. Okonkwo-Bell, who told me I had the most disciplined, analytical mind she'd seen come through her program in over a decade. She pushed me toward the Chartered Financial Analyst designation the way some professors push talented students toward grad school. I almost didn't sit the first exam. I almost let the old voice, the one that used to tell me I was too much, too sensitive, too needy, talk me out of it. But I sat it. I passed it. By the time I was 28, I had all 3 levels of the CFA behind my name, a junior analyst role at one of the big pension funds headquartered downtown, and a salary that, the year I turned 30, crossed 6 figures for the first time. My mom, who'd worked 30 years as a nurse and never once made more than $70,000, took me out for dim sum in Markham to celebrate and cried a little into her tea. And then, at a conference in Banff when I was 31, I met Desmond. I have to tell you about Desmond properly, because people who hear what he does for a living tend to flatten him into a job title, and that misses the entire point of him. Yes, by the time we walked into that backyard together, he'd already built something people in our industry recognized, a fixed-income strategy firm he'd co-founded that had, over 6 years, grown a reputation most people in Bay Street finance circles knew on sight. But the Desmond I fell for in Banff was a man who argued with me for 90 minutes about interest rate spreads over conference center coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Harper years, who laughed easily and often, who texted me 2 days after we exchanged numbers and said, "This might be too direct, but I haven't stopped thinking about the spread argument, and I'd like to lose it to you again sometime." Too direct. I loved too direct. I'd spent years with a man who never said anything straight in his life. We dated for 10 months before he told me he was falling for me. He said it on an ordinary Wednesday, not over dinner or candles, just standing in my kitchen in Liberty Village while he dried a dish I'd just washed. "I wanted to say it doing something completely unremarkable," he said, "because I don't want you thinking it's about the moment. It's just true, regardless of the moment." I nearly dropped the dish I was holding. We got married a year and a half later, a small ceremony at a vineyard out past Niagara-on-the-Lake, just close family and the handful of friends who'd stuck around through both our messes. My maid of honor was a friend named Annika, who cried through the entire ceremony and kept whispering that she'd told me Garrett was a collector. years before I'd been ready to hear it. Poppy came along 2 years after that, born on a Tuesday in February during the kind of snowstorm that shuts down the 401 6 pounds 11 ounces. With her dad's stubborn jaw and my impatience already fully installed. Desmond sat next to my hospital bed for 14 hours, holding my hand, talking about everything and nothing. His childhood in Halifax, why hospital food is somehow worse in every country, the name we'd finally landed on after 3 weeks of arguing, and I remember thinking this is what it was supposed to feel like. Not the performance of being loved. The actual thing. Life settled into something almost too good to examine too closely. We bought a house in Oakville, 4 bedrooms, decent school zone, a condo board. A homeowners committee, since it was a townhouse complex, that sent us a strongly worded notice once about our recycling bin being visible from the street for an unreasonable duration. Desmond found this hilarious. I found it mildly infuriating. Poppy started junior kindergarten. Desmond traveled for work, but never in a way that felt like disappearing. I kept working 4 days a week after my mat leave ended, and the fund was unexpectedly decent about flexibility, which I hadn't counted on and was deeply grateful for. The party invitation came from my cousin Madison in late June, her engagement celebration, family and close friends, backyard, barbecue, nothing fancy. I almost said I had a work thing that weekend. I didn't have a work thing that weekend. Desmond was the one who caught me hesitating over the reply email at the kitchen counter. "You should go," he said, leaning over my shoulder. "It's basically half my graduating class at Western by way of Madison's fiancé," I said. "I haven't seen most of those people in years." "Even better," he said. "You get to show up as exactly who you are now, not who they remember. Garrett might be there." Garrett and Madison's fiancé had been frat brothers, a fact I'd been quietly dreading since I found out who Madison was marrying. Desmond went quiet for 2 full seconds. Then, with no edge to it at all, just calm, like he already understood something I was still working out. I RSVP'd yes. I bought a sundress, the kind that doesn't try too hard but doesn't apologize for itself either. I did my hair the morning of and looked in the mirror and thought, okay. What I hadn't planned on was Poppy begging to come along. She was 5 and had absolutely no concept of what a backyard engagement party for distant cousins entailed. But she'd overheard Desmond and me talking about it for 2 weeks and had developed a powerful conviction that she was being excluded from something important. She stood in our front hallway in her strawberry cardigan, which she'd insisted on wearing despite the June heat, and looked up at me with her father's stubborn jaw. "I want to see Cousin Madison's house, Mom. Please." Desmond was supposed to finish a call and meet us there later, once Poppy was dropped at his sister's place in Burlington. That was the plan. Plans, I've learned, have a habit of rewriting themselves right when you need them to. I drove to the party alone. I walked into that backyard alone. I found my aunt near the dessert table, where someone had set up a hideous, wonderful display of butter tarts, and for about 20 minutes, it was actually nice. People had lived whole lives since high school and undergrad. Someone had opened a bakery in Hamilton. A guy who used to flick paper footballs at me in residents' common rooms was now a pediatric nurse and looked genuinely thrilled about it. And then I heard that laugh. "Whitney? Whitney Sorensen?" People have asked me since whether I was braced for it, whether I'd prepared myself to see him. Honestly, I thought I had. I thought 8 years and a CFA designation and a husband who told me he loved me on an unremarkable Wednesday, and a daughter who insisted on wearing strawberries in 90-degree heat had prepared me for anything Garrett Holloway could throw my way. I was mostly right. I just hadn't anticipated the precision of it, the way he aimed it for an audience. Never did find anyone to put a ring on it, huh? The backyard noise thinned around me. The coworker's eyebrows stayed up. I stood there for half a second, not shrinking, just gathering, mouth half open on a reply I hadn't finished forming. That was the exact second I heard the sneakers on the patio stone. That was the exact second Poppy came flying across the yard, strawberry cardigan flapping, face lit up like she'd just won something, hollering about her dad. And I watched Garrett's expression do something complicated, recognition, then something colder as the side gate creaked open and Desmond stepped through it. I watched the color actually drain out of Garrett's face. His jaw went tight. His shoulders did something involuntary, some small defensive flinch he probably wasn't even aware of. And I thought, there it is. There's the moment you never saw coming, Garrett. Because you never paid attention to anything you'd already decided didn't matter. And he recognized Desmond for a very specific reason. One I hadn't fully thought through when I'd said yes to this party. A reason that was about to make the next 2 hours the most satisfying of my adult life so far. Poppy was already tugging my hand, pulling me across the grass toward her father, chattering about how Dad had found street parking right in front of the house, which was apparently a near-miraculous achievement, and how he'd let her hold the GPS the whole drive over, which was an even bigger one. My daughter, 5 years old, in a strawberry cardigan, with absolutely no idea that the man standing 15 feet behind us had just had the worst 30 seconds of his week. Desmond came through the gate and scanned the yard the way he always does. Not searching exactly, more like orienting, the way someone does when they're completely at ease wherever they happen to land. He spotted Poppy first, grinned, then found my eyes, and the grin didn't change at all. Warm, easy, real. "Hey," he said when we reached him. He kissed my cheek, then crouched to Poppy's level and straightened the collar of her cardigan with 2 fingers. "Looking sharp," he told her seriously. She beamed like he'd handed her a medal. I turned around. Garrett hadn't moved, but everything about him had changed. The practiced ease was gone. He looked like a man doing arithmetic and landing on a number he badly didn't want. Because here's what I hadn't fully processed when I said yes to this party. The reason Garrett's face had gone the color of drywall wasn't only that Desmond was my husband. It was that Desmond Desmond's firm, Birchcroft Capital, was the fixed income shop that, 18 months earlier, had been the target of an aggressive short campaign that a junior portfolio manager named Garrett Holloway had publicly championed across 3 separate finance podcasts and a long, smug LinkedIn thread, calling Birchcroft's risk modeling borderline negligent and predicting a reckoning that would, in his words, embarrass everyone who trusted these guys with their clients' money. The reckoning never came. Birchcroft posted its strongest year on record. The Ontario Securities Commission, which had opened a routine inquiry partly fueled by the noise Garrett helped generate, closed the file with a 1-paragraph letter that used the word unfounded. Desmond never said a public word about Garrett's role in any of it. He didn't need to. The numbers said it for him. And now here was Garrett Holloway, standing in my cousin's backyard, having just asked the wife of the man whose firm he'd tried to torch on a podcast whether she'd ever managed to land a husband. While that exact husband crouched 6 feet away, fixing their daughter's cardigan collar. Madison hadn't moved either. I could feel her at my left shoulder, the way you feel a change in weather before it arrives. Madison had been a reliable social broadcaster since high school. Whatever happened in the next 5 minutes was going to be relayed to 40 group chats by morning. Desmond stood, Poppy's hand in his, and looked across the yard. He found Garrett. His expression didn't shift at all. That was somehow the most devastating part. The complete absence of theater. He looked at a man he recognized with a face that said, clearly and without any need to say it aloud, "I see you, and you are not worth rearranging my evening for." Garrett made the mistake of walking over. I don't know what he expected to happen. Maybe he thought he could do what he'd always done, turn on the charm, manage the room, get ahead of it before it slipped away from him. It had worked for him since high school. He stuck his hand out. Garrett Holloway. "I'm with Crestline Partners now. Whitney and I go way back." Undergrad. Desmond looked at the hand for exactly 1 beat before shaking it, the brief, professionally courteous handshake you give someone you have absolutely no further use for. "Desmond," he said, "I know who you are." The way he said it, not sharp, not sarcastic, just level, precise, like a door closing without being slammed, made something in Garrett's posture falter. Garrett laughed, that social laugh that buys time. "Small world," he said. "I was just catching up with Whitney, congratulating her." "On what?" Desmond asked, perfectly calm, perfectly curious. Garrett's laugh flickered. "On everything, I guess. Life's clearly been good to her." "It has," I said. My own voice came out steady, clear. "Desmond, Garrett was just asking if I'd ever managed to find someone to put a ring on it." The yard around us had gone very, very quiet. Not silent, there were still 60 people drinking and laughing on the far side, near the grill. But the people within earshot had developed that particular stillness of folks who've stopped pretending they're not listening. Madison hadn't moved an inch. A woman I half recognized from high school had drifted 3 feet closer in the last 90 seconds, holding a butter tart she'd clearly forgotten about. Desmond looked at me. Then at Garrett. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He smiled. A real one, not a performance of one. "What'd you say back?" he asked me. "Poppy beat me to it," I said. "Dad," Poppy said helpfully from somewhere around hip height. "That man said something to Mom and Mom made the face." Someone near us made a sound that turned into a poorly disguised cough. Desmond crouched down to Poppy's level with complete seriousness. "What kind of face?" Poppy considered this with the gravity of a 5-year-old expert witness. "The face you make when somebody says something rude, but you're being polite about it," she announced. There was a beat of crystalline silence. And then the woman with the butter tart laughed, one sharp involuntary bark, and Madison gave up on composing herself entirely. And even the man who'd flicked paper footballs at me in residence made a noise that was very clearly a laugh badly disguised as a throat clear. Garrett's jaw tightened. His grip on his drink shifted. He was doing the math again behind his eyes. How to salvage this, how to reframe it, how to leave the yard without looking like the guy who'd just been summarized by a 5-year-old. "Well," he said, and something in his voice had lost its polish. "Good to see you, Whitney. Glad things worked out." He was already starting the retreat, the slight pivot of the shoulder, eyes scanning for somewhere else to exist. I let him get exactly 2 steps. "Garrett," I said, quiet, clear, just for him. He stopped, turned back. "I want to make sure you actually heard what my daughter just said," I told him. "Not because I need you to feel bad. I spent a whole summer once asking myself what was wrong with me, what I needed to fix to make you stay. I was 22 and I thought that was a real question." I paused. It wasn't her so second. Took me a few years to figure that out. Took a CFA designation, a husband who tells me he loves me on regular Wednesdays doing dishes, and a kid who apparently has excellent instincts. But I figured it out. Garrett said nothing. He had the look of someone who'd walked into a room expecting to be the tallest person there and discovered the ceiling was lower than he remembered. "Have a good night," I said. "Congrats on Crestline." He left, genuinely left, got his jacket from the pile on the spare room bed, said something brief to Madison's fiancé, and was gone within 10 minutes. Madison clocked it and texted me the timestamp later with 3 separate exclamation points. What happened after wasn't dramatic at all, which is the part nobody warns you about. Poppy wanted to know if there were any more of the little hot dogs, because the cardigan was making her warm and she was hungry. Desmond found her a plate of mini sausage rolls, which she inspected with deep suspicion before declaring acceptable. Madison found me by the dessert table, and we talked for almost an hour, genuinely talked about her wedding planning and my job and what it actually feels like to hit your 30s and finally recognize your own face in the mirror. The woman with the butter tart, her name turned out to be Raina, an old classmate from second-year stats, stopped by and said, "Not quietly at all. That was the best thing I've seen at a family function since my uncle's retirement speech got interrupted by a raccoon." I thanked her. I meant it. Desmond sat with Poppy at the picnic table and let her work through an entire plate of sausage rolls, and every so often I'd catch him watching me from across the yard with an expression I know well by now. Not pride, exactly. Something quieter than that. The look of someone who knows precisely where he wants to be and is glad to be there. By 9:30, Poppy was asleep in her booster seat before we'd cleared the second set of lights on the QEW, still wearing the strawberry cardigan despite the heat. Desmond drove, and I sat in the passenger seat, and for a few minutes neither of us said anything, just the hum of the highway and Poppy's small, even breathing behind us. "The face you make when somebody's rude but you're being polite," Desmond said, finally, smiling at the road. "She's got your timing," I said. "She's got your instincts." I looked out the window at the streetlights sliding by, billboards for mattress sales, and a personal injury law firm with a phone number that rhymed. No finance podcasts up on this stretch of highway. I thought about the girl who used to sit on her apartment floor on Richmond Row, asking herself what needed fixing. I thought about how certain I'd been at 22 that losing Garrett Holloway was some kind of permanent damage I'd be carrying around forever. I did carry it, just not the way I thought I would. I carried it the way you carry a scar that healed clean. You can find it if you go looking, you remember exactly how it happened, but it stopped being a wound a long time ago. It just became part of the map of how you got here. Here, specifically, being a car on the QEW next to a man who tells me things on regular Wednesdays. Behind a sleeping 5-year-old in a strawberry cardigan who tells the truth about faces without knowing how rare that actually is. About a year after the party, Garrett quietly left Crestline. I saw it mentioned once on LinkedIn, something vague about pursuing new opportunities, and I read it standing in my kitchen with a coffee going cold in my hand. And then I finished the coffee and didn't think about it again for a long while. Poppy still wears the strawberry cardigan to things it has no business being worn to. Dentist, appointments, the grocery store, one memorable trip to renew her health card. Desmond bought her 2 more in different colors because, as he put it, a person should have options. Our homeowners committee sent another notice this spring, this time about the height of our hedge. Desmond had it framed and hung it in his home office. I still find it mildly stressful. He still finds it hilarious. And honestly, that one small disagreement might be the most accurate portrait of a good marriage I know how to give anyone. Some things you don't get over. You just grow past them, the way a tree grows past a fence that was once tall enough to hold it in. Eventually, you're just bigger than the thing that used to define your shape. The fence is still standing somewhere, you're just not inside it anymore. That's the whole story, really. The girl in the strawberry cardigan told the truth. The man at the gate didn't need to say a single word. And the woman who once thought she needed fixing walked out of that backyard knowing, with a kind of certainty nobody else needed to confirm for her, that she had never been broken in the first place.